Hi kids, welcome to another Kids Central Online. I'm so glad that you've joined me today. We've had a couple weeks off from these Kids Central videos, and that was because we were so busy planning our children's Christmas performance and practicing it for last Sunday. Now, even if you were not there in person or you didn't have a part in the children's Christmas performance, I hope you were able to watch it at home, and I hope it put a smile on your face. And know that we were thinking about each one of you guys and hoping that you were following along with us. So we are going to pick up our story from where we left off. Last time I was with you, we were talking about Jacob. He was on his way to find a wife, and he found one. We saw that he married not only Rachel, but he also married Leah. And that was because Laban tricked him into thinking he was originally marrying Rachel. So we talked about that, and we talked about how he had a dream about a ladder that reached from the ground where he was sleeping all the way up to heaven. And we know that that ladder symbolizes Jesus. Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. No one can get to the Father in heaven except through Jesus, through faith in Jesus. He's the one who makes it possible for us to be part of the family of Abraham, part of God's family, God's child. So we're going to continue our story today about Jacob after he leaves Laban's house. We're going to be reading out of the Gospel Story Bible again, and today's story is called Jacob's Wrestling Match. After Jacob and Laban made their agreement, Jacob continued his trip back home. It had been more than 14 years since he had seen his mother and father. Jacob traveled under the blessing of God. For along the way, the Lord sent angels to meet with him. Can you imagine when Jacob last saw his mother and father and his brother Esau, who he had tricked? Esau wanted to kill him. He was so angry. So you can imagine Jacob was probably a little bit afraid of what his brother would do to him. But the Lord met him along the way. Jacob knew that the Lord was with him, but he still had his brother Esau to deal with. The last time he had seen Esau, his brother had been furious with him for stealing his birthright, stealing his blessing. As Jacob drew closer to his homeland, he sent messengers ahead to greet Esau, because he was afraid his brother might still want to kill him. When the messengers returned, they told Jacob that Esau was coming to meet him with 400 men. Jacob panicked and divided his group into two. That way, if Esau attacked one group, the other one would survive. Wow, Jacob must have been so afraid. He didn't know if Esau was coming to attack him, to greet him with gladness. He didn't know what was going to happen. Jacob asked the Lord to save him as he had promised. Then Jacob thought of a plan. He would send gifts ahead to Esau. Jacob gathered large flocks of goats, rams, camels, and donkeys to present to his brother. The animals were sent ahead, one group at a time, so that Esau would receive present after present after present. Jacob hoped that if Esau was angry, the gifts would help to calm him down. Then Jacob took his family, moved them across a stream, and spent the night alone. So let's stop right here for a moment and talk about what's going on. We know from Jacob's past that he's a schemer. He tries to take things in his own hands and figure them out, solve them. He tries to control the situations around him. God had already told Jacob that he was with him. He even sent angels to Jacob so Jacob would know that God really was with him. Here, though, we have Jacob afraid of Esau, and his fear causes him to panic and to take things into his own hands. So I'm not saying his plan was a bad one, but you still see this character in Jacob of trying to do things his own way. So let's see what happens. He moved part of his family over across a stream, and he spent the night alone. That night, God visited Jacob as a mysterious man who came and wrestled with him. The wrestling match continued for a very long time. At dawn, when the man saw he was not winning, he touched Jacob's hip and put it out of joint. He asked Jacob to let him go, but Jacob said, "I will not let you go unless you bless me." See, Jacob knew this man that he was wrestling with was no ordinary man. Maybe Jacob thought this man was one of Esau's servants come to attack him. But he soon realized that this man was not ordinary and had the power to bless him. Who do you guys think this man is? Let's see. Then the man said, "Your name shall no longer be called Jacob," which means a deceiver, "but you shall be called Israel. For you have striven," that means wrestled with God and with men, "and have prevailed." Interesting. Right here in this verse, we see who that man actually is. It's God. Then he blessed Jacob. Jacob named the place Penuel, which means face of God, because he knew he had seen God face to face and survived. He saw God in the form of a man. Now, there's a couple things I want to point out about this story. First, God changed Jacob's name to Israel. The name Israel means to prevail with God. You see, Jacob was not going to prevail by doing things his own way. Jacob would prevail, have victory, overcome, doing things God's way and in God's strength. The second thing I want to point out is that even though it seemed like Jacob was winning this wrestling match, it only took one touch on his hip from God himself, and it put his hip out of joint. That means his bone actually came out of its socket. And you know, for the rest of his life, Jacob had a limp. It was a reminder that God was stronger than he was. And the third thing was that God had the power to bless Jacob. True blessing comes from God. We can try to control situations and do things our own way and think we're going to give ourselves a big blessing. We're going to give ourselves what we want, and that's what will make us happy. But that's just a deception. You see, true blessings come from God himself because God knows what is truly good for us. We don't always know what is best for us. We see what's in front of our eyes and what we want. But as God works in our hearts, as His child, He starts to transform our heart, to change the things we love, to line up with the things He loves. So, this story tells us how the nation of Israel got its start. Remember, God had promised Abraham that He would make from him a great nation. So it went Abraham, then Isaac, then Jacob, whose name was turned to Israel. And now these people were known as the Israelites, the people of Israel. The name God gave Jacob would be used for all of Jacob's children, and eventually for the whole nation of God's people. Jesus Himself was called the King of Israel as He rode triumphantly into Jerusalem, and He was mocked as the King of Israel when He hung dying on the cross. God named Jacob Israel, knowing that one day Jesus would die bearing the name the King of Israel. You see, this was God's chosen people. They were not perfect, but they had a perfect God. So when we rest our faith in Jesus Christ, we become part of the kingdom of God, where Jesus is King. So that is our story today. I hope you guys enjoyed listening to it and learning from it. Next week, I will be continuing the story, and we will have another Kids Central online. I love you all. I pray you have a great week. I'll see you later.